Hi, this is Mark Daly. This is a summary of a webinar I gave on August 28th entitled How to Investigate Procedure Not Followed. So this is part one of the webinar. Part two is going to be Thursday at 10 o'clock Eastern Time. That's September 3rd. I'm not going to read the material on each one of the slides. You can pause this video and go back and review parts of it. We just wanted to give you a quick way to review what we covered. The end of most investigations within companies is human error or equipment failure or procedure not followed, or training less than adequate or design. We're going to focus specifically on procedure not followed. Our point is, instead of stopping at procedure not followed, this becomes a good point to begin a more detailed, more specific investigation. If you stop at procedure not followed, the solutions end up being brief employee or review procedure with employee. It's just not specific enough. This why question, it's important to dig into that. But frequently people say, well, I don't know why I didn't follow the procedure. I just forgot. I messed up. I wasn't thinking. I didn't realize it. The responses are just too vague because the question is too general. Why didn't you follow the procedure? If a particular procedure wasn't performed properly, you would really need to know, well, which work process was it, which step was it, which part of that step was it, and then have the person walk you through those steps, and then you can get into much more specific questions on why did it happen that are just easier for the people to answer. Our view from a think reliability standpoint is there are work processes in an organization. If you don't get the result you want, that's what a problem is. The investigation is clearly defining that problem, identifying the cause and effect relationships that created it. You can start very basic and add as much detail as you need, validating those cause and effect relationships with evidence, and then identifying possibilities, different ways you could solve the problem, and then selecting the best ones. Those best solutions that are selected are then implemented within the work process and become those improvements. This is usually known as plan, do, check, act. But really we see the cycle as the organization's already doing something. Their measurements are the check or verification of that. If they're not getting the results they wanted, the act is really the root cause analysis to dig into that issue. And then what comes out of that, the solutions, are the new plan that says this is how we're going to move forward. With this simple cycle from process and problem, to prevent problems in your organization, you have to improve the work processes so that they don't occur, which really means any problems you do have in your organization are actually caused by your work processes. And that's really where that reliability piece comes in. You don't do root cause analysis to just constantly do root cause analysis. You want to be better at investigations to prevent the need to do the investigation, if that makes sense. And that's why I say problems and processes must be connected. What is a work process? When we talk about what a process is, the definition is just a series of steps to produce an end. And when we ask organizations, does your company have a work process for everything it does? Frequently people say, well, no, not everything. But really, whatever the organization is doing are their work processes. The analogy I used in the webinar was the word diet means whatever you consume. So really, everyone's on a diet. It's just people use the word diet to mean structured deprivation program, but everyone is on a diet. Every organization has work processes for everything that organization does. Now, they may not be written down, but whatever they're doing, those are their work processes. If an organization wants a work process to be laid out very clearly, then they write out those steps. It's called a procedure. But the work process exists regardless of whether or not the procedure is written. A work process is really just how work is done. You can make a process map for how it should be done or how it is done, but fundamentally a procedure is just a written explanation of how the process is supposed to occur. A checklist is a summary list of items within that process. Training is when you teach people the process. Supervision is about adhering to and improving the process. And a job safety analysis, a brief, or a timeout is a preview. Once people are previewing the process, an audit is a verification or verifying that the process is actually being followed. And experience is people's individual know-how within a particular process. So every process can be represented visually. We would just call it a process map. Some groups call it a flow chart or value stream. Whatever term you would like to use, we just like the perspective of process. Very basic level, there's always inputs and outputs. Any process can be broken out into more detail. So any basic process that says we do this task or this process can be broken out to 3 or 4 or 5 steps, and then any one of those particular steps can be broken out farther into much more detail. The people that actually do the work at this detailed level. So to investigate procedure not followed, instead of working it at that basic level, you have to get to the detailed level where the people actually do the work, and the questions are just much more specific. Process maps don't replace procedures or checklists or training. They just complement them. The process flow just gives you a clear understanding of what comes first, what comes second, and lets you communicate a little clearer with the people that are closest to the work. It's easier to involve the people. To get into the details, it's much easier for people to talk about the process than to talk about what they did. But when people explain the details of a process, they're actually explaining what they specifically did while performing the work. So anytime you do an investigation, you always want the details. It's just easier for people to talk about the process than it is to talk about themselves. The idea is you get to minimize some of the blame. Instead of who messed up, the question becomes, how are we going to improve this process to never let it happen again? And you want input from the people that do the work. They've got good insight. They see the things that go well and go poorly. They really need to be connected to this ownership of the process. We're trying to avoid this classic labor management split where management says it's people mess up and the people closest to work say it's management systems. Instead of pointing fingers, those statements are just way too general. What links an organization together are the goals. Management, labor, both want zero injuries. So if you start with the goals, it's just a great connector for the group. Blamers tend to take no responsibility. It's always someone else's fault. Less blame actually means more accountability in the organization. Don't blame anyone. You have to think about, well, what could we have done to prevent this from occurring? So even though we're talking about addressing work processes and digging into procedure not followed, it can affect even the language and the way people communicate, which is an important benefit within an organization. Every work process, as it breaks out into detail, the person that has 10 days of experience sees the specific steps in the procedure. Somebody with 10 years of experience might add in additional steps. The people that add in these additional steps, we call those experienced people. The inexperienced people are using the same procedure. The experienced people naturally add in these steps. They sometimes don't even realize they do it because it's second nature. So the 10-day person and the 10-year person, even though they're using the same procedure, they might be performing the task differently. When people say, well, they've just got a lot of experience, what we hear is their work process is different than the inexperienced people. And we want to understand what's specifically different to get some continuity and share that information with what should be done in that organization. To us, these are examples of work processes. Filling out a custom order, following a recipe, that's just a work process. A play for a football team, a choreographed dance, landing on the deck of an aircraft carrier, all these are examples of work process that can be considered simple, can be considered complex, but either way you would work them to whatever level of detail they need to go to meet the goals. Here's a classic Edward Deming quote: "If you can't describe what you're doing as a process, you don't know what you're doing." Something he pushed all the time, this extreme bias for process. It's normal that people make errors, so to create a highly reliable work process, you're going to trap the errors. No one is perfect. People naturally make mistakes. Mistakes can be made within routine tasks. It's the errors that get all of the attention, but really the majority of work goes well. People don't usually make errors on purpose. If it is on purpose, it's called sabotage, and it becomes a criminal issue. But people make mistakes all the time. It's just not necessarily on purpose. They've just forgotten something or missed something. Highly reliable work processes help trap those errors, and frequently organizations think, well, because we haven't had any errors, it means our work processes are fine. But the question is really, did your organization have zero failures yesterday because of your work processes or in spite of them? Are people doing things and little workarounds and fixes that maybe the organization management's not even aware of that prevents issues from occurring, or is the work process actually creating that result? And you can imagine how important it is to have the people closest to the work connected to this process bias and telling management which procedures are clear, what's confusing, what's going well, what's not going well, and continuing to dial this in terms of reliable work processes. Here's an example of managing by process for pilots on a commercial flight. When they go through specific steps, they have a checklist. If their error rate is 1 in 1,000, meaning every time they read an item, 1 in 1,000 is the likelihood of them missing one of those particular steps. If you think about it, that lays out from a cause and effect standpoint. The negative goals are impacted because of the error, because the pilot missed a step. An error rate of 1 in 1,000 is probably pretty conservative. People forget and inadvertently dial the wrong phone number, forget something on their grocery list. We're talking about a pilot flying an aircraft that they're human and they sometimes forget things. On commercial flights, what is done is the pilot and the co-pilot, the first officer, both go through a checklist, and there are certain items on that checklist that must be followed in a particular sequence in series. If two people have an error rate of 1 in 1,000 and they go through the process in series, it can change the error rate from 1 in 1,000 to 1 in a million, meaning for the error to occur, the pilot had to miss step 2 and the co-pilot had to miss step 2. Both of those causes have to occur for the error to occur. Either one of them not occurring prevents the incident, meaning the pilot could forget it, or the co-pilot could forget it, but the other one catches it. That's one of the reasons in the United States there are 12,000 commercial flights a day, and there are very few incidents. The incidents are up to 3 years in between. An important concept in terms of reducing risk, reducing the likelihood of an incident occurring, is managing by process. You could have a process that has a higher reliability than the people that execute it, if you think about how this error rate lays out. About 3 years ago this week was an unfortunate incident, plane crash in Lexington, Kentucky, and we have a summary PDF document and a web page on this information. It's got some questions related to procedure not followed on this particular issue, where the aircraft took off on the shorter runway, a runway that was half the length of the runway that they needed. There were some misunderstandings about some construction at the site. The advantages of this process view is this visual dialogue allows people to change the way they communicate. People are looking at the map. It gives you some objectivity. People can talk about and point at the process. Once you've documented this process and laid it out, it's not only a record of the steps, but it becomes a pretty useful training guide that you would continue to use again. You don't keep building the same process map. You keep pulling out a copy of the map you've created. It's just like organizations manage their manufacturing process. You do the same thing for your work process. It helps for troubleshooting and improvements in business continuity when people change, and it captures specific know-how and experience within that organization. The idea is someone's ability to do their job increases over time. They become the experienced employee, and if they move on to a new role, unfortunately what happens is the new person moves in and we have to kind of start over. And so the organization moves through what Brian Joyner in fourth generation management calls an eyelash curve in terms of learning. It would be great if we could build on what we already knew, and this is where that process bias is extremely important, is you can almost pick up from where you left off, and it creates this concept of a learning organization. In terms of documenting this, just using pencil and paper to get started is great, even using chart paper in the meeting rooms. The dry erase board is a great way to lay it out on the dry erase board electronically. Obviously, people that have worked with Think Reliability know our extreme bias to the tools within Microsoft Excel. We map all of our problems and processes within Excel. Here's an example of a process map within Microsoft Excel, and if you want a copy of our template, it's on our website for free at thinkreliability.com. But all of the flowchart shapes that people use and how they use the map processes are already built into Excel. It's just a very easy way to share information, and the worksheets are obviously very helpful. We have additional webinars on just the Excel tools also on our website. Getting started on this approach, just select one work process. You don't have to change your whole company. We want you to quantify the impact to the goals of the deficiencies within this work process. What does it really mean to the organization? Obvious, a recurring problem is a great candidate to start with because of the potential value and difficulty in dealing with that in a current sense, that people may be frustrated or confused or anything that's not going well is a great candidate. Involve the people that are closest to the work to get their input. The technology that you use in your business might be fairly complex. Extreme bias to keeping the process clear, make it simple. You realize your technology is complex, but you make this task simple, not simpler, in the sense of you add detail to make a process clear. So you don't want to make the approach of mapping your process more complicated. You always want to keep it simple, and it's why we talk about these multiple levels. We think that's very important. Really, the conclusion from this is that problems don't really happen because tasks are too clear. Problems occur because of misunderstandings, and people didn't realize that and didn't know that was going to happen. You can never really have things too clear, and that's one of the biases for work processes, providing a clear understanding of roles and responsibilities. It becomes part of your training and your operations. Utilizing the knowledge and experience that's already in your organization is really key for making the improvements, and these process maps are a great way to get people involved. The only way you can build the detailed level on a process map is to involve the people that do the work, and it's just important to get that input and that connection. The part one of our webinar that we did for this material was on August 28th. It's free. We're going to do it again here in the future. You can check the schedule on our website. Part two is coming up this week. It's Thursday, September 3rd at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. We're going to go through at least 2 hours of time in terms of much more detailed explanation of procedure not followed with some examples and show you how to document the mechanics of doing this within Excel. And part three is what we're saying is some of our clients have said, well, that's great that you're going to do this part two, but why don't you just do that for me on our issue? So we've included in part three 2.5 hours of additional time in terms of working remotely, one-on-one with that client, and dissecting one of their work processes. This information is on our website. We certainly want to demonstrate that there's value in doing this. So you'd want to pick a problem that's some recurring issue, something's not going well, you have limited time, and you just need some help on addressing that issue. That's the intent of that part three. It includes the webinar in part two, plus us working the incident. The objective for our company is to be a root cause analysis resource for our clients. So we focus specifically on our clients' goals. You can attend one of our public workshops. The next one is in Dallas on September 16th and 17th. We do cause mapping 2 workshops, which are specifically facilitation and documentation. That one's in Kansas City. You can host a workshop at your site. Once you're going to send about 3 or 4 people to one of our public workshops, it is as economical to train 30 people at your site by having us come to your location. We do facilitation and coaching remotely, and these detailed webinars have been a good resource for some of our clients too. So if you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to contact us or visit our website. We have a schedule of webinars that you can find out there at our site. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to send them in. Let us know what you'd like to see more material on. Thanks a lot. Have a great day.